When does a knife become a sword? Let's talk about it. This is a surprisingly common question. I've often seen or heard people wonder whether something is a knife or dagger or a sword. Or where do you draw the line between a large survival knife and a small machete, for example? If you've been with this channel for a while, you already know the answer. It depends. But let's see if we can come up with some kind of rule of thumb. The obvious criterion to go by is length, because what distinguishes a dagger from a sword is, well, one is a whole heck of a lot longer. How much longer, though? It's obvious enough in case of the extreme ends of the spectrum. For example, a parrying dagger and a rapier. You will not confuse this for a dagger or this for a rapier. However, in case of a gladius or some other short sword, how short can it be before it turns into a dagger? If we take off this much, is it a dagger now? Yeah, arguably. This much? Probably. This much? Maybe, maybe not. This much? Probably not. It gets especially confusing when a particular type of weapon or tool comes in all kinds of different lengths. For example, what we classify as a Yatagan can be a short sword, but very well also a knife or dagger. The same is true for a sax. Most of these fall pretty obviously into the knife category, but longer ones were made too, all the way up to what I would consider pretty obviously sword length or machete or whatever you want to call it. We can easily agree that this is not a parrying sword, but a dagger, both in function and length. It's not much shorter than this. Granted, this is a post-apocalyptic themed fantasy gladius, but the length falls well within the range that you see for historical gladius. So where do you draw the line? I've seen specific numbers put out there to distinguish a knife or dagger from a sword. It can be something like up to a blade length of 30 centimeters, say. This is probably already longer than that. So let's say up to 40, something like that. Problem is, wherever you set that number, if something is just a centimeter longer, it's now suddenly a sword. But if you took this and made it just 1 centimeter longer, is it really significantly different? Of course not. And of course the problem with absolute numbers is that something would be a sword in the hands of one person and a dagger in the hands of a much taller person. So it makes more sense to go by proportions relative to the body, right? For example, something like a dagger has a blade that's shorter than the length of the arm, you could say. Uh-oh, I guess that's a knife. Well, it actually is. We'll get back to that in a moment. Okay, how about the blade of a knife or a dagger reaches no further than from your elbow to your wrist? This is already a tad longer. Less than elbow to fingertips? Okay, that's just about not a dagger then. A few years ago, I tested and reviewed a Swiss Degen, which is frustratingly right in the middle of that gray area. It's shaped like a dagger, and those existed again in a variety of different lengths, but that particular one was awfully long. It was as long as a short sword in my worldview. So we can't go by length alone, right? Or at least if we do, there's always going to be something that overlaps. What does looks like a dagger even mean? You might say, well, a sword usually has a substantial guard and a fairly large pommel, which daggers usually don't. Well, a Roman gladius has pretty much no guard. The kinjal is another good example. Same basic handle with a blade length ranging from dagger to short sword. In general, the further you go back in history, the more difficult it is to distinguish something based on the shape. I mean, just look at this. Make it shorter and it's a dagger. How would you look at such a simple hilt and try to distinguish between sword and dagger? In some cases it's easy enough, like this rondel dagger. The way it's designed just tells you that it is indeed a dagger. For one, it's quite thick. If you made this a full-length sword, it would be rather clunky. And also the way the handle is shaped. We have a round handle that is not helpful with edge alignment, which you don't need with this. And you've got these two discs that kind of wedge the hand in there and restrict it to a hammer grip. There are swords that do the same, like Viking swords, like a gladius. But if you made this longer, if you just kept increasing the blade length more and more, I don't think this would ever turn into a sword. This would always be a dagger, even if it becomes a really awkwardly overly long dagger. At least on an intuitive common sense level, I think we can easily agree that if we took this saber, chopped it off right here, and then reground a tip on it, it wouldn't suddenly be a knife, right? Not with this kind of hilt. But if you do the same thing to a rapier, it's just a parrying dagger, right? Strictly speaking, in terms of typology, there is a difference between a sword hilt and a knife handle. On a sword, typically, you have an enclosed handle that goes over the tang, then a pommel goes on top, and then it's attached in some kind of way, whether it be peened or threaded or what have you. A knife usually has a wider tang with handle scales attached on either side, and no pommel, sometimes a pommel cap. But there are exceptions. Sometimes you do have a fully enclosed handle as well. Generally, the hilt construction and the blade being single-edged is what makes this a Messer, the medieval German word for literally knife. But clearly, this is not used like a knife. It's used like a single-edged sword. So it all breaks down somewhere. So how do you distinguish between a knife and a sword? It depends. Whatever rule of thumb you want to come up with, however you want to define it, wherever you want to draw the line, there's going to be crossover. There's a sliding scale. You know, the closer you get to the outer ends of the scale, the more obvious it is. But in the middle, there's just something there that doesn't quite fit. Humans always have this obsession with neatly categorizing everything. Order, disorder, light, dark, black, white, sanity, insanity. But it's not that simple. Reality doesn't conform to your preconceived notions. Do you understand? Anyway, that about wraps it up. Don't forget to do the thing with the stuff down below, engagement and all that. Thanks for watching. Take care. If I've been making more jokes about going crazy lately, that's because that's kind of what it feels like, fighting the uphill battle on YouTube. Whenever the algorithm's not on my side, my only response is try to make even better videos and more of them and all of that, which takes its toll mental health-wise. And I apologize if it's been having an impact, but please do let me know if there's anything that you think could be done better, things you would like to see improved, or something you would like to see more of, things of that nature. I've also been trying to grow my Patreon and YouTube memberships by making more exclusive content. So if that's something that interests you, check out the link below. But otherwise, thank you for making it to the end. I appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.